Welcome to another episode of the Carry Trainer Higher Line podcast. So today we are going to have our inaugural Carry Trainer podcast. Mickey Schuch here, Carry Trainer, and I've got Z Von Durham, known as Instructor Z. Something we talked about doing for a while, and we're finally getting around to making it happen. Welcome, Z. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm very good. I have learned a ton, more than I ever thought I would know, about how to record with two people in two different places, as I know you have as well.
And the pitfalls that can happen during that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like a million different little nuances to make it work out correctly. I think we've finally got it nutted up. So here we are. So when we originally started talking about this last year, of course, there's plenty of people that do podcasts and different radio type scenarios talking about training and martial arts and things like that. And so we thought we would share some of the deeper things that we have discussed in personal conversations, right?
Right. There's plenty of surface issues and content that can be talked about, and I think we both share a passion for going a little bit deeper into that and being a little more human instead of just putting on those facades that come along with this industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's seems to be plenty of those. That being said, I think both of us, I don't want to use the word attracted in a weird way, but I think we were kind of like attracted to each other because we both shared some of the same mindset, a word tossed around like crazy in this genre of society, but I think often misunderstood. Would you agree? Or maybe misinterpreted?
Yeah, misinterpreted and probably tossed around so much that it seems generic and lost its meaning to a lot of people when you say mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And by mindset, we mean many different things, which more importantly, just the human mindset and being able to achieve and push through troubles and the hard parts of life and still thrive in an industry such as the gun or fighting or survival industry that we seem to be a part of.
I think when I first met you, I heard you say Green Beret mindset. Was that correct? Something you said like that?
Yeah.
And what did you mean by that? I mean, most folks here in America have heard of or know what a Green Beret is, right? That's our Army's special forces. What does that mean, that broad encompassing term?
Well, I guess it could mean several things. There's levels to it. So as the average person that maybe is not affiliated with the military in any kind of way, the Green Beret mindset, they hear that and they think he's thinking some cool guy thing like, be hard and tough and go, fight wars or whatever. But there's more to it than that. I don't mean it that way at all. I don't mean anything so much about being tough or better than anybody. I mean it as being well-rounded, not putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, by becoming a shooter and being a great shooter, which, if you're a competitive shooter or that's your business or whatever, I mean, that's what you kind of have to do. Everybody's kind of good at one particular facet of life, whether it be by choice or by circumstances, but we strive as a Green Beret professionally. We have a lot of different jobs, and it changes, or the priority changes according to gets or what's going on in the world at the time. You understand? And so in preparation for that, we try to make sure we're as good as we can be at communication via language, immersion, or whatever the case is, and we try to be good at various different facets of fighting. That could be psychological warfare, that could be strategy, that could be hand-to-hand, that could be with firearms, that could be with explosives, munitions, that could also be building rapport and developing an army from scratch to free themselves. De oppresso liber, free the oppressed. That's what we're trying to do, and a lot of times we try to come in and help those that need guidance in that area to free themselves, to build an army out of what they have from the ground up and defeat their oppressors. So that's what I mean, in a nutshell, the Green Beret mindset, being well-rounded, striving to be as good as you can and not overlook any skills or strategies that will help you when the shit hits the fan in life.
Mm-hmm. So you can apply then that same mindset outside of your military background. You can take all of that same mindset and apply it to your civilian shooting practice, your relationship with your wife, your jiu-jitsu practice, your job outside of your military career. That's what you're saying?
For sure. And part of that Green Beret mindset, or that paying attention to our vulnerabilities or our weaknesses in order to make them better, and not just sticking to what we know because that's our comfort zone, is dealing with the part that doesn't have to do with the sexy stuff. You and I think we share the same mindset when it comes to, I go shooting all day. I could be training and doing stuff as far as tactics and techniques and to do with the industry we're involved in. I could do that all day, no problem. It's not really a job for me. It's a love, it's a passion. But when it comes down to the other life things, like having to get in touch with your emotions or be sensitive to other people's needs that are in your family, or try to identify with other walks of life, such as my 4 daughters, and then my youngest son, and then my wife on top of that, dealing with everyday ass pain of normal issues and problems that everybody faces. That's the hard part. Sometimes that's the weakness, that's the vulnerability. That's not what we love to do, but yet we can't overlook it. And that's part of being well-rounded as well, not just shooting and fighting and driving off-road and whatnot. Living life. You agree?
Yeah, for certain. It's this mindset thing. As we're chatting about it, I'm just kind of like musing in my head how so often it's instantly correlated by, in this case, instructors for defensive principles or firearms, things like that. It's instantly correlated to some type of spidey sense, situational awareness, and leaving out all of these other facets that really make up a well-rounded adult. That's kind of what I'm hearing from you. It's not just the will to take the hill and overcome and achieve all goals, despite any obstacle or foe. It's perhaps a holistic's a good word, a holistic approach to life, how we approach problems in general, whatever they might be.
Yeah, and I think from most people's perspective, a lot of the things that guys like us do can be considered, from a surface point of view, as being hard or difficult. But they fail to take into account that the guys that do that stuff chose that. I volunteered several times for the things that I've been a part of and done, and I wouldn't have done that if I didn't enjoy it or get some kind of satisfaction out of it, right? I think humans in general are instincts to take the path of least resistance. I use an idiom or analogy, I guess, of water rolling downhill. Like when water goes downhill, it finds the path of least resistance and goes that direction. When it runs into a rock, it goes around that rock, and over time, I guess it could cut rock, but it takes the path of least resistance. And I think we do the same thing. And for guys like you and I, whether you have a military background, police background, or not, we like to do the hard, satisfactory, glorious things that are of this industry, and the other parts, the less glorious, the less glamorous, the getting to know people, that is the hard part. That's the hard part, and we avoid that. Everybody avoids things that are not in their comfort zone, and true courage and resolve is facing your weakness or your vulnerability, what you're not good. If I'm great at shooting and I go shooting all the time, that doesn't make me courageous. It says that I just enjoy I do the things that I enjoy. Like, how hard is that? But if I face the typical issues that we have, like getting to know myself and not just relying on my comfort zone, getting facing those vulnerabilities, getting better at being sensitive, getting better at facing issues with my ego, issues with my pride. That requires courage. That requires resolve. And that is hard to do.
For certain. And I think for a lot of us, it's the concern or the fear of what others may think, because it's that delving into that whole world away from the macho bullshit. It's, what's he gonna think?
Right.
What's my buddy Kyle gonna think? Or, you know what I'm saying? It's not that normal tangible stuff of what men are supposed to do, quote unquote. And then just that alone gets so many people of the frame of mind where I'm not even going to bother, because I don't want to hear from my pals that that's the kind of stuff I'm into now. They're going to think I've lost it, or I've got soft or weak. When in reality, that, like you just said, that's really what the measure of true strength is, when that person can look at themselves like that and begin to make those self-adjustments and assessments.
Or need a better illustration, like a microcosm, I would say, of being aware and facing the hard part of life, or hard part within yourself, would be kind of like being on the range. Like, I'm sure you've done it, I've done it, and many out there have done it. You've been on the range and you're supposed to be running a drill at your own pace. Each person's doing it individually, and you notice 2 or 3 guys are running it fast or knocking it out at a speed that they can run it, and you start to speed up and do things to stick with them, and end up not being accurate or screwing up the drill of some sort, because you feel that pressure of, hey, I got to show them that I belong in this group, so I got to go fast as well. I don't want to be the one over here being slow. So in your mind, you took into account the things outside of you that really doesn't pertain to making you at shooting or doing a drill, and let that push you into basically wasting bullets, because you just start shooting fast in order to keep up with the measure that you're using to decide your worth in that particular instance. You know what I mean?
And it's when in reality, if you had just done what you were supposed to do, you'd be much better off. You'd be getting a better value for your time and resources on the range. And truth be told, most of the other people would have looked at you and said, hey, there's a guy that can measure himself and do what he's supposed to, rather than let ego take control. There's a guy I train with, his name's Matt, and I wouldn't say he's the best shooter in the world. He's a jiu-jitsu guy, actually. He's a good shooter. And I've done a lot of different classes where we were both students together. And one thing I've always been impressed about with him is, whatever the drill is, he's a rule follower. So whatever the instructor or coach gives, you can watch him, and oftentimes exactly what you're describing right here. If it's some type of measured drill where there's supposed to be a set cadence or accuracy, perhaps, where time is not a component, he'll be the last guy to finish, because one, he doesn't give a shit if other people are waiting, because he's there for him. And that's always impressed me about him. I don't care what these other people are going to think or say. I'm here for me, which, not a selfish thing. That's the whole point of training, is to improve oneself. And that, I think it perfectly illustrates what you're talking about. I think we probably all know somebody like that, where I've been totally guilty of that, where you perform and then you look at the result and you're like, I know I can do way better than that. And you try to think back, if you have the presence of mind, to what just happened. And for me, it's usually, man, I kind of like lost it and just went hyper speed, and the wheels fell off because I outran my headlights.
Yeah, so you start worrying about those external factors that really are not providing any value to what you're trying to do, instead of just focusing on what's important for you at that, and what do you need to do to become better, or what is your primary goal in that particular instance, and what are you trying to do. You start thinking about, hey, am I fitting into this group? Am I good enough to be here? Am I looking like a shithead and I need to save some face somehow?
That's interesting. That I think what we're talking about right now kind of sums up the total of my mindset and my training philosophy, which is not anything indicative to me, but something that I've kind of latched on to, which is taking control of our thoughts and then recognizing them and not acting on the emotions that perhaps those thoughts elicit, unless required. Sometimes I think that's like a big man problem, right? Start to lose your temper and we feel that building and away it goes, or we feel fearful and we have a set response. These are things you and I talk about often, but I think for me personally, these are things I hear from students especially that they appreciate about what we talk about, because it's stuff that I think most men, well, let me go back. It's stuff every man needs to be thinking about and working on. It's stuff few men, especially in the genre of society, to use that phrase again, that we're talking about. It's very few of them, because it's not macho, it's not cool to delve into. So it's like that's what's most needed. When I see students that are struggling with whatever the problem, I keep having this same issue, and then you look, and it's almost always exactly what we're talking about. They're afraid to go a little deeper in and start to look at the thought processes and how they react to whatever stressors are involved in their training. And then I'm sure if you went a little bit deeper and got into some of their personal life, you'd find the same issues manifesting themselves in work, in relationships. And not always, because some people compartmentalize those things, but I think it's oftentimes the case. We've had lots of conversations with students like that, and you'll hear, yeah, man, the same thing, now that I'm talking about it, rears its head elsewhere. What do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. I think, again, back to our instinct being the path of least resistance. I mean, where we're comfortable is where we tend, what's the easy way for our emotions and our sensitivities, and what's less fearful. The known is always not as scary as the unknown. So we try to go towards it, like, hey, I know how to do this. Mick tells me to, demonstrate how to, draw my gun and point it. If I'm real good at that, and I do that all the time, hey, I can demonstrate that all day. But then you say, hey, show me how you get up off the ground real quick, and maybe I don't do that. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm kind of out of my comfort zone here. Fear automatically rises, and I start, if I follow through with it, I might mess it up, or that'll be in my mind, or whatever. But I wouldn't be as comfortable, and I'm shy away from doing that because that's not my comfort. And I think, I can't speak for women, but from my own self being a man and knowing a lot of men and talking to them about this, like, I think we're more likely to shy away due to fear or pride issues. We're so concerned about it, a lot of us anyway, especially in my experience in the special operations realm and military, or people that have achieved a lot or have some kind of a rank or eminent position. They have a lot to lose, right? They feel like they have a lot of what's the word? The reputation or what people, they're really concerned about what people think of them because they've achieved a lot. They built a lot for themselves. Right? You become fearful of being seen in a different light or feeling at something because you're held at this level, right? So it becomes even harder. So as an instructor, you start facing that a lot more. Like, I found myself, and I see this in the jiu-jitsu world. It's a going joke with jiu-jitsu practitioners. Like, when you're like a higher belt or a high rank or presumed to be better than certain people, and you start grappling with them or rolling with them, sparring with them, someone lower, considered lower, and they start doing better, that the guy that's presumably better will try to act like he's showing them something, then like, oh, okay, now that's how you do that, or like I'm giving them a submission or something like that. Or you start changing the pace of the sport, like you're turning it into like a hands-on instruction session versus competing against them, because it's easier for you to do that. It's kind of like what you're good at teaching and what your passion is instructing. You use that as the vehicle to shy away from the fear of losing face because someone outdoes you in a sparring session. So it's funny how we can even trick ourselves because we're so concerned about that. We'll trick ourselves into thinking that we're actually doing something beneficial, or, hey, I'm an instructor, I should be teaching right now, when the fact of the matter is you were really competing and you seen that this person may be getting the best of you, so you started turning it into an instruction. You know what I mean?
I've been guilty of that with students for sure, or being in a class as a student and people being like, oh, he thinks he's some instructor guy, let's see what he can do. So my brain tells me, when in reality I should just do what I got to do to perform whatever the task I'm working on. But that little voice in the brain there, that brings up a good point, something that I think many people that study martial skills for any length of time arrive at this conclusion of instincts. Like how many times have we been told by teachers, by parents, follow your instincts, just follow your instincts, Z. And if you think about that from what we're talking about, if I follow my instinct to do some kind of dipshit behavior because of my pride or fear, then that's not helping me. My instincts are not helping me. Just like if you and I get in a ring and you start beating the hell out of me, my instinct is probably going to be to cover my head up and try to stop you from hitting and kicking me. That will not help me, right? That might help me for a second or two until you've knocked me unconscious. So sometimes those instincts, and we trick ourselves into thinking that we're doing ourselves the right thing, because, well, that little voice inside wouldn't be telling me to do this if it wasn't correct, as if we somehow have all of the programming we've ever put in our subconscious we're making the assumption that it's correct. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. And instincts is, we have survival instincts. We have, our body physiologically even does things to help us survive, right? So, I mean, it's not always beneficial, though. I mean, that's just the bare bones necessities of being a live thing, is you have some kind of survival instincts and some kind of settings, for lack of a better word, in your body and mind to help you survive worst case scenarios without having any training or strategy put into place yet. I think that's part of God's creation. We're here to survive. You have to do so long enough in order to get to the point where you can learn different ways and better ways to do things in order to thrive. I know survive and thrive are often overused words, but thrive meaning find other things more intelligently, strategically, more beneficial, more to win and not just to live to see another day. One example physiologically I can think of is shunting in the body. When your appendages, you start losing a lot of blood, like say your hand was blown off or something like that, your body automatically, I'm not a medic by any means, but it retains all the blood in the core of your body, in your organs, the things that keep you alive. So it's hard for medics, if they're trying to give you fluids like an IV, it'd be hard for them to find a vein in your arm or leg at that point, because all the blood is gathered into your main source of living, which is your core and your heart and all the things that are required in there to keep you running. So your body does that automatically. Is that good? Not necessarily. If you're a medic trying to give somebody an IV, you have to do some kind of venous cut down and find their vein underneath the skin, or go in their neck, or some crazy stuff like that. So, and that's the body's natural reaction to keep you alive. But there's better ways to do things. And survival instinct, like you said, going to the fight or flight reaction, fight, flight, or freeze. I like to throw freeze in there. Like, is that always going to be beneficial for you? Not necessarily, depending on the circumstances. If you fell down on the ground and covered your head and got in the fetal position while somebody was beating you up, you're still going to get an ass whooping. Maybe you protect your head for a little while, and if it's something to, where your family's around, not doing anything helpful to help them, if you're just laying on the ground protecting your skull because that's your survival instinct, So there's better ways to do things, and that's part of growing up, being mature. And having parents, having mentors, that's why there are those positions, so people can show you something better, more beneficial for life.
Which, when you just as you were talking, it's like, I think sometimes this gets to be an easy go-to what I'm about to say, but I think it's important. It all comes back to what are our goals? What are we trying to do? It's how I start every class, or if somebody contacts me and is looking for guidance, what are you trying to do? What's the goal? What is the purpose of it? And as we're talking about this, so many times we have all these different thoughts, feelings, emotions, and we try to process them, analyze them, do something with them, and all of that noise is going on inside of us in the midst of whatever we're physically doing. And if we don't have some purpose or goal behind whatever we're doing, be it sitting through a boring lunch meeting or achieving some great task, how can you best process that information? I think for a lot of people, if they do not have some of those defined goals, and the goal doesn't need to be something extravagant or extraordinary. It can be something very simple, like I'm going to kick ass at work today, or I'm going to get along with my wife better and not react with anger or getting upset about something that causes an argument. It might be something very specific or simple like that, but instead what happens? We get that negative emotion or that negative bit of input, and then we default back to what always happens. Something else you and I talk about all the time, that those default thoughts that we go back to. So that's something I personally work on constantly. What am I thinking about? And just recently I've gone through a little mental funk. It happens to all of us from time to time. And for me personally, I have to identify it and say, hey, bitch, you know what? You know what you're supposed to do. Stop giving in to these negative thought patterns. You got to kind of just shake it off. And it's a conscious action. Just like the focusing on some goal or destination is. It's got to be, they must coincide. Otherwise, it's all just theory.
Right. I think us, as speaking for men again, as far as I know, in men and the men that I've known that have talked to me about this, like yourself, I think every day we face something like that. We face something that we have to make a decision about in our head and say, am I going to let the fear of feeling or pride or reputation get in the way of me continue to do what I'm going to do? I mean, I think I face that from any situation, going to the gym, making a call that's to a person I might not know, to do with business maybe, am I going to come off right? We have all those little bitty thoughts and little bitty fears pop up in our head throughout each day, and we have to face it. And you get better the more you face it, right? I mean, composure or exposure, what I like to say, exposure equals composure. So we expose ourselves to that and we conquer it and address it on a regular basis. And it might be kind of shoddy and crappy at first. Maybe we just say, hey, I'm going to just get on the phone, and it don't go so well, but you face the fear of going through with it. And then as you do it more and expose yourself more to it, you become better at it, and it becomes a better end product. You perform better at it. But it starts off addressing it, and a lot of people don't realize that they're taking that path of least resistance to it because they know that it's uncomfortable to do the other. So we'll just stay here, and you got to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest and say, hey, I am scared. I am in fear of this. And then you ask yourself why. Why am I scared of this? And you probably have some good answers sometimes. Sometimes they're fears that are not really realistic for some people. So you talk yourself through it, and then you focus on one thing that I learned from a performance psychologist was, win. What's important now? The acronym WIN. And that's what I go to a lot of times. So for me, in my mind, it's never an option to not do what needs to be done. Out of my mind a long time ago. That took time as well. So when it's time to do something, I have to do it because it must be done. So now it's focusing on how am I going to do it, and just finding the best way to do it. So I'm not quitting, not giving up. I'm not going to let it defeat me. That's not an option, ever. Now let's just focus on what's important now. How do I get up, get some coffee, feel better about myself, make a little outline about what my conversation is going to be like on this phone call to this potential client maybe, and see if I can set myself up for success, because I'm not giving up or giving in to the fear of failure. It's not going to happen. Can't do it.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's a start right there. Just putting your finger on it and saying, yeah, I have this fear. Admit it. Understand that everybody has fear, and don't let that be some kind of something in your head that causes you to feel bad about yourself. Because some people, I think, feel bad about themselves because they even have any sense of fear or have to admit that they have fear to themselves, when the fact of the matter is every single person has fear, and actually there's no courage without fear, because that's facing fear. You know, it doesn't require courage to face something that is not scary to some degree.
Sure. That's a fantastic point. The thing I've had to remember is, depending on different people's backgrounds, where they came from, their home life, what might be terrifying to one might be a Sunday dinner to the other. And you and I've talked a little bit about our upbringings. I'm not talking about backgrounds as adults, but those things shape and mold, as we know. It's common knowledge. These things shape and mold, though, what and how we perceive certain data as adults, which requires us sometimes to do what you're exactly talking about. Face that stuff, get through it, realize it's not going to kill me, and go on. I've got a family friend. She's in her 50s, and I don't think she's ever been to a funeral, because since she was a little girl, she was scared of corpses, of dead bodies. I don't think she went to her own mother's funeral. And you meet people and hear those kinds of things, and it's like, what? For real? Like, I mean, I don't know too many people that enjoy funerals, but to have such a visceral reaction that you would miss your own mother's funeral. She literally would start convulsing as an adult if somebody tried to tell her she had to go to a funeral or to a wake or something like that. So the more you give into that stuff, the stronger the fear takes hold, where you begin to believe. There's things like that I've had in my own life for sure, not to that point, but I've told this story before in our conversations. I tell it in class sometimes about some public speaking stuff that's caused me to almost pee my pants, because my body dumped a big load of adrenaline once, and it's comical. My body feels like I'm in danger because all I have to do is walk in front of a group of people. And of course, that's not the case, but we feel like it is, and you got to fight through it. Which is what I think the problem is with most folks that continually have unhappy existences. They have become, oftentimes, I don't want to make a gross generalization, but many times just too complacent with or too what's the word I'm looking for? They too easily just agree with that fear and give into it, and it becomes something they're not even cognizant of anymore. It's like breathing. It's just this happens, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to run from it. I'm going to put my head in the sand. I'm going to tuck into a ball, whatever the response may be. And that's the go-to. No ifs, ands, or buts. And they don't even see it as a problem, which is what develops all of these dissatisfied adults.
Yeah, I think a good word would be compliant. They become compliant with with that demand of their instincts and their fears, and they say, well, hey, I've heard people say that, people that I know personally, they'll just say, no, I can't do that. I don't do stuff like that. That's not me. And in my mind, I'm like, I give them grace, and I don't judge anyone, because I've had different life experiences than they have, and I've had to force myself to do things that I was, just because that's inherent with the military and what I've done, and some of my life as well, my personal or my civilian life. but they kind of they comply with that and say, hey, well, I guess that's just not me. I just don't do that. And the way my mind works is like, well, if I have to do something, yeah, I know there's a possible way to do it. I look at it a little more logically, and I think that's a requirement sometimes, because we can't let our emotions decide everything. We have to look at things a little logic, add a little logic and intelligence, and be like, well, if we take this step, and this step, then we could possibly do what we're trying to do. We have to focus on those steps in the process that takes us to that point, instead of just saying, no, that's crazy, I can flip, or I can never shoot that fast, or I can never hold down a grown man and submit him.
Where are you going with this?
Not going anywhere. I was just saying. One thing that I don't know if it's from the military, probably mostly from the military, but there's a degree of resolve that comes from that. The mindset, you're brainwashed a little bit. I won't lie. You're brainwashed to be mission first, to put mission first and put the military before everything. And it's kind of necessary to get the kind of results out of the soldiers that you need to get. So you tell them, hey, the mission comes first. You do what you have to do, no matter what, and look at it as a strength and say, hey, look how much resolve. They have a steel trap brain that says, hey, you tell me something crazy that I have to do, but if you say I have to do it, or there's a reason that I need to do this, then it's going to get done, and we'll figure out a way to get there. That's a good thing. It's good to have that type of resolve, but that also, ironically, can be a weakness. And I discovered that once I got out of the military, that my resolve and my steel trap of a brain that says, hey, I got to do this, all my focus is there, bam, I'm doing it. It also caused problems in my personal life and took me away from my family. And I was real insensitive about the issues that my children were facing, my wife was facing, because I looked at things different. I looked at it like, well, hey, I said you got to do this, you got to do it. About your feelings about it, I don't care about your opinions about it. I don't care about any of that. You have to do it. That's the bottom line. So I was very what's the word I'm looking for? I was dismissive of their opinions and feelings on things, not because I didn't care, but the path of least resistance for me was to say, yeah, I got to do it and it's got to be done. And then that became an easy path for me to give to them, instead of helping them work through their issues and being there to listen and being supportive of anything for them. I just tried to apply some kind of soldier type machine mindset to it, because that was the easy route for me. I didn't realize that was the thing that I was doing until I started looking inward and working on my relationships, my personal relationships with my loved ones. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So what made me strong, or what I thought made me strong, was actually making me weak in a certain area of my life. Now, is that crazy shit or what?
I mean, it makes total sense. I don't like to use the word balance because I think it's so overused. But that is out of balance. A little bit of wine's good for you. A lot is not. And that you use the word brainwashing, and that's exactly what we're trying to do to ourselves, though, aren't we? Aren't we trying to program ourselves so that our automatic responses to failure is to try harder? Our automatic response to an upset wife is to sort out the problem and bring it to a conclusion rather than losing our shit. The automatic response to an issue with a client or a customer is being a customer service minded person and in providing awesome value so that you continue to grow and thrive in your business or professional life. But that's brainwashing. So I think what you just described is definitely indicative of a lot of men and a lot of women. I've got a female family member that was a very driven corporate woman. My a family member said years later, she has 2 kids, and she like put them in daycare like a month after they were born so she could get back to hard charging. That was 30 years ago, and she looks back and regrets it because the job came first to her. It was something that was so important to her, so she missed a ton with the kids. Of course, you can't go back and change that stuff, but I think that's pretty much what you're saying, isn't it? The mission became more important than everything else, and you probably never would have verbalized that.
Right, exactly. And it's just showing that your strength in one area of your life can also be a weakness in another area. So that comes back down to not just being driven and strong and facing fear, but also being truthful and looking at the big picture. So we can become so driven on one certain thing, and then you have to come back and recalibrate sometimes and say, well, what's the big picture though? Like, yeah, I'm great at this, but how's that affecting the rest of my life? And in my case, how is that affecting the people that are going to be there for me long after the Army and long after any kind of accomplishments still and insignificant accomplishments are gone and fall away from this other life. Who's going to be there? Who's going to be supporting you? Who's going to love you? Who's going to be there throughout? And I need to put some effort into that area and not just stick with what I know and say that's good enough because that's easier for me, which has been a real hard thing to recalibrate a lot of things. And I always tell people when I'm training them or in this industry and for first responders, military, I talk about I over E equals C, intelligence over emotion equals control, which is right. When you're operating in that capacity, intelligence must always come first. You can't let the emotion take over, but emotion is a thing for a reason, and you can't let intelligence and being some logical machine-like robot, even if for the benefits it provides, it can't be everything. You can't let it interfere with those that you love and the other lives that you're entangled with.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
For sure. It's as we're talking about this, I just flashed across my own mind 1,000 times that this has reared itself in my life and oftentimes the funny thing is I feel like I'm doing awesome. I'm kicking ass, and then you find out that something fell through the cracks, and it was usually something important, and then you go look in the mirror and you're like, dang, here I was on cloud 9 patting myself on the back that I'm achieving, accomplishing, kicking butt, and then I realize I'm so ignorant I completely negated to see this thing that should have been right in front of me, be it family or a lot of times we meet people that have health issues and they get so caught up with work that they let their body go, right? And there's this, oftentimes they say it's no excuse, but it just happened. All of a sudden 10 years went by and I gained 50 pounds, and it's that again the balance. But I don't know if there ever is a balance. It's constantly always like it's kind of like more like a piano in my mind, like our life. We've got all these different keys that we have to press at the right time to get the right sounds out of it, and some of them are used more than others, and you're just constantly going back and forth and plugging in energy into these different areas that require it. And as the facets of our life change, like now my children are both, my son's in college, my daughter's got a year of high school left, so what was required and important for me 15 years ago is completely different today as a father or provider, so these things constantly are changing.
Right. It's once you realize things like this and you have some internal dialogue with yourself about certain things like this, or even me and you, the way we talk about things and the way we're talking about it right now, it also does another thing in your life that's beneficial. I think it gives you some patience and understanding and grace for others, because you realize that you too have been at a point in your life where you were completely ignorant to whatever changes you need to make, or you're doing things completely wrong just because your viewpoint or perspective at the time was didn't know, and that was, you had your mind set on this, and that was success and good for you. That was your definition of it at the time, so that's what you did. And then later on you were exposed to something else, and you said, okay, well, all right, well, I was kind of stupid back then, and this is more important. But it's all like steps, it's levels. Like, you don't know until you know, and you continue to progress. And other people do that too, and they might not be at your level, they might be ahead of you, and you got to give them grace. And hopefully they give you some grace when you're dumb as hell and not doing the things that you're supposed to do, not because you made a choice and said, to hell with being what I need to be, but because maybe you didn't know any better, or maybe that's the place in your life, and that's as much as you could see at that time from your vision.
That's huge, and that's something that I've been. I think that's one of those, the older we are kind of a things, and I've got some guys that have done work with me that I look at some of the younger guys, half my age. I watch them doing stuff, and I want to get angry, and then I think, man, I did that 2 times as much as he did. I can't say he's a dummy any more than I am myself. And unfortunately, that's how we learn. If we all just listen to the textbook of life, we'd all be perfect, but we have to pick up and stumble. I mean, that's really the gist of like my course of life, is helping other people in whatever capacity I can kind of sort some of that stuff out. And I'm not I've got no college background or training in therapy or counseling, and I would never try to come off that I do, but seems like so much of it is just being aware of self. And I hear from people all the time, like, man, you're different, you're crazy. And it's like, I'm not crazy, I'm not different. I just literally don't give a shit, in a positive way, what people think. It's not like I'd walk up and call somebody a mean name and not care what they think, but I'm not concerned if people judge me for how I choose to live. And that was definitely not always the case. I spent the better part of my life as a young man. Maybe I said I didn't care, but of course many of our decisions are based on what will he think or she think or they think. And now it's extremely freeing, and this isn't a new thing for me, but the more time that elapses, the deeper that mindset takes hold in me. What's best for me, and in a positive way, not a selfish way, because I think we have to have this, my personal belief that there's really no life worth living if you're not being of use to others in some way. If your whole life revolves around just your own self-pleasure and satisfaction and what you can get out of life, I personally, just from a philosophical standpoint, I think that that's a pretty shitty way to live, and you're never really truly going to be happy or fulfilled. So it's, what am I going to do with my time, with my resources, to impact the world in a meaningful way, all while living happy and living in a fulfilled manner? Because I think some people also take that to the other end of the spectrum, where they want to give, trying to fill some void or make themselves feel valuable, where they give everything away and they are spent, and that's useless. Right. Too.
It's almost as if, like, what you said, you don't give a fuck what other people think, and I know what you mean by that. Basically, you've gotten closer to what's truly and fundamentally important in life, so you've learned to let go of some of the other things that you may have used to worry about, maybe, or whatever. And it's kind of like the path that we're all on, and those levels we're talking about. Like, you start out and you have all these things vying for what's important in your brain or in your emotions, and then you slowly, as you get older, if you're honest with yourself, and if you make yourself not go the path of least resistance all your life. You take a stand somewhere at some point. You start to get closer and closer to what is truly fundamentally important in life, and the other things fall to the wayside and they become less of an issue as you get closer to that point. And then we're all at different points on that ladder. Some of us are near the top, which I don't know who is, but some of us are just higher, a rung above or below someone else in that path or climb to that fundamental truth of what is important in your life or in general in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
And that's the beauty of being a individual citizen of the earth here, is everybody can attach different meaning to their life and utilize their time in different ways. I enjoy the training. I enjoy the tactics and the discussions of how we can create citizens and cops and soldiers that are better at winning a fight. But even for somebody like yourself, the actual, and I'm talking a little bit outside of my lane, but I'm going to bet that you'll agree, if you take all the time of your life that you actually were fighting, that's still a minute portion of your time here on this earth, albeit a very important time when you could snuff out your life if the trade-off is death if you don't win. So it's highly important. But then I think too often we spend so much time in these different, a lot of people, it's hobbies. They say it's not a hobby, but it is more of a hobby. This martial path where you're learning about gunplay and fighting and knives and things like that. It's for, I see it for a lot of people. It's a sexy hobby that is masking them from dealing with the deep issues of who they are and where they're going and what they want out of life. I don't fault them for that. It's their choice. But would you agree with what I said about you or people like you?
For sure. It's all just parts in your life, and it's not the biggest part. And I had to come to terms with that once I retired. I got out of the military. Like, you realize how much your identity and your individual view of your own self-worth is tied to this portion of your life. So once I didn't have the title of Green Beret anymore, I wasn't a part of that anymore, and I wasn't, a part of the day-to-day activities, getting ready for this thing or that thing or the training for this thing. And you fall by the wayside, even with your own team that you were a part of. Like, they have other things that they need to focus on now. They're not there to just support you all the time because they have a task and job to do. Like, you lose, you have to come to terms with, I'm not as important particular situation as I once was, because that's their area now and I'm in this area, and it causes some change. It can be a change for the worse or for the better. You can tuck into your fetal position and be like, woe is me, which I went through a little bit of that. I felt some depression symptoms because of separating from the military and not feeling that sense of self-worth that I once had. And then, so me being who I am, I said, you know what? I'm not gonna fucking wallow in this forever. I have to redefine what makes me worth something. I have to redefine it because I know there's something. I'm still here. I'm still something. I'm still something valuable. Maybe not to that respect, but I've got some children that truly depend upon me. And maybe nobody's patting me on the back or giving me any awards for being here for them, but from their perspective, I'm pretty damn important, for the things that I do for them. And that's not the only thing. I mean, my wife and other people's lives that I try to impact in a positive way. Like, there's other things that make us valuable, and even if we didn't do anything that is considered great by society standards or our culture standards, you're still valuable. And then we get into, you know, your fundamental belief of you know, what life is all about. We don't want to open up that can of worms, but
No, I think that that's an important thing to touch on.
I have to at some point
Right.
get to the bottom of that. We are valuable despite anything. Go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you. I think that that's I wouldn't be scared to open that can of worms. I think that what you just said, like, what is this fundamental meaning of life? Yes, we don't want to delve into the philosophical greeting card type answers to that, but that I think is the all-encompassing question. Why are you here? Why are you training with these guns? Why are you training in these martial skills? Why are you seeking to be quote unquote happy? Like, what is that even mean to you? So, like, if you can't quantify those things, how can you arrive there? If you can't identify a target, how can you hit it? If you don't have some tangible goal, and I think that what you just said really, for me, it hits the nail on the head. I spent years of my life. I envy you, not for in a negative way, but you know, some of the things that you spent your life doing. There was many clearly defined goals, as you've told me through your career with the Army. I got to go do this, I got to go do that, I've got to go to this school, to go to that school, and I'm sure for you, each one of those things was do the best you could. So it was like constantly clearly defined goals, and it was, whereas I spent a large chunk of my life kind of trying different things as a young man. Will this thing make me happy? Will this thing make me good enough? Will this thing fill a void that I can't even quantify or recognize the shape, size, or scope of what's there, all the while possibly pointing fingers at family, loved ones, work associates as problems to my perceived inadequacies, you know? So I think that, like, whole what's the meaning of life thing is really something we should be asking ourselves, because it's that if you can't answer that, like, what does it mean to you? It might be a religious answer or something else, but that's kind of something. If you can't answer it, how can you get there?
Well,
how can you?
You kind of you're limited to, like, the path you take in life, kind of, in my opinion. I mean, we bring up. So if you're not driven by your identity or what you do in life or whatever, you know, drives you or gives you a sense of self-worth, like, once that goes away, which it will, inevitably, it will. I think you ask anybody that's lived a long life and had some experience in various areas of success will tell you that, hey, that feeling or that sense of self-worth coming from that part of my life went away. It didn't last forever. So either you have that and then you tumble down the hill after that, or you tumble down the hill, I guess probably the same. You tumble down the hill, and then in order to deal with it, you just escape, which comes into drugs, drinking, whatever you do to escape reality. All right, that's what a lot of people choose nowadays, instead of facing the fact that that's not the end-all be-all. Whatever you got your self-worth from is not the end-all be-all, and you have to adapt and find some other way. Or the other thing is, it brings up the discussion of the higher power, the value of human life and where we come from in general. And I know, you know, that's a topic for another day. If we choose to jump on that, you know, religious preferences, philosophy, like you're saying. But once everything else runs out in life that gives you a sense of self-worth, all these material and tangible things, where do you go from there? And then that's where you got it. And it's not necessarily a rock bottom happen. It's just an embracing of, there's got to be something more important and valuable about me besides my title, rank, or achievements in whatever I choose to be a part of. There's got to be something more than that. There's got to be. And if you can't find a way to envision that and see that and feel that in your life, then I think you're doomed to get on that path of least resistance to escape and go down some other path, or you'll continue seeking things to make yourself relevant to this society or culture by achievements or something like that. It's just like an athlete that's been to the Olympics. Some of the elite level athletes, like, what do you think they go through after they fell off that pedestal and they're not physically capable of doing that anymore? That you'd be crazy not to think that their identity in some form or fashion is not tied into that. Their identity and their self-worth. It has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's a lot of discussions and research done on the crash that happens to athletes after winning world titles or gold medals, because they were so goal oriented that then once they achieve it, there's such a void in their life, they don't have somewhere to go. There's a cool quote came from the manuscript of Otho, the Battle of Maldon. I don't know how many gazillion years ago this was. He said, "The mind must be stronger, heart the bolder, courage must be greater as our might lessens." Colonel Jeff Cooper had that engraved on the mantle of his fireplace. Everybody here should know who Colonel Jeff Cooper was. And I read that years ago, and I actually had printed it and put it in a frame, and it's in my office. And basically that writer was saying, as our body's going to fail at some point, the things that will be gone. So the only thing that you can replace that with is your intestinal fortitude, your courage, your mindset, because that is one thing Father Time will strip from all of us. And I think that exactly what you're saying, it dovetails right in there. You have to make plans for that. That happens with a lot of men, where our identity is so wrapped up, I think, in what we do. What are we, our ability to earn a living, to bring home the bacon, to be the big tough guy protector, right?
Mine still is. I still get some kind of ego and pride satisfaction out of doing the things I'm doing. Being on a podcast with you is giving me some kind of, feeling of accomplishment, or I wouldn't be doing it. We're all doing it to some degree.
I agree.
No.
Now, that's not always a negative thing either. We can satiate our ego in a positive way, and we can satiate it in a negative way. I don't need to be told I'm awesome or great or wonderful, but there's nothing illegitimate or negative about doing what we're doing with our lives, passing on. One of the next things I'd like to do a podcast on, if you're comfortable with it, personally, I'd like to share some of my background in massive blunders, because I think too many people, for fuck's sake, from where I came from to now, I'm okay with patting myself on the back from time to time. There is nothing wrong with saying I'm proud of what I'm doing and it's a good thing, because by the grace of God, I didn't end up locked up in jail or shot in the street or something because of some of the stupid ass stuff that I did as a kid. So I think that we get too hard on ourselves, where we get this like self-flagellus thing where we abuse and beat ourselves up because we don't want to be too ego-driven. Then if we do anything that satiates the ego in any kind of a positive manner, then we're like, oh no, I shouldn't, allow myself. And I know that's not what you were saying, but I just want to make sure, people understand that. There's on that same token, if you came from a very elite genre of society, I have friends that are national and world level shooters. I've met people that are major league ball players, and many of these people get so egocentric where they become like the stereotypical nothing else matters but me reaching my goals, that rock star status where you can just step on anybody to get where you want to go and everybody's beneath you. That's the negative side of that journey. A lot of these people that I've talking about have failed marriages, kids they don't talk to because they moved on past everything else that they saw as a stumbling block to them achieving the goal, which that to me is an injurious way of living. If you want to do that, or if you're going to destroy your family and become so goal oriented on whatever that thing is that you're willing to throw it all away. But that's the case with a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it'd be a good thing for us to share our blunder at some point in time and talk about where we had it wrong and we had to pull through. And something that I always remind myself of is kind of cliche, and I've heard other people say it, is like everything you've been through has gotten you to the point that you are now.
Sure.
So you got to go through shit, and some people got to go through more shit than other people, relatively speaking. And once you identify with that and realize that and know that's the truth, you become more compassionate for people. And wrapping all that into one thing, or wrapping it up into a big package, I would say all those things we're talking about, and being self-aware, having that internal dialogue, being honest, having talks like this with a good day of the truth, like you are with me, and just getting that shit out there and accepting it and becoming less ignorant to all that shit equals that compassion for other people. Which, what do you think compassion helps you do? Helps you become a teacher or an instructor of some sort, because you can you can empathize with a lot of people and sympathize with everybody pretty much. And I know some people don't know the difference in empathy and sympathy. One is basically you understand from first-hand experience, and the other one you can just envision it even though you haven't experienced it yourself, basically. But you need that quality to be some sort of instructor or teacher, mentor, father. So if you're a dad out there and you're not good at being compassionate, hopefully you are with your kids. Take what you're doing with your kids and apply that to when you're teaching somebody on the shooting range how to hold a pistol or be safe, And I think those qualities really help an instructor out. It helped me out a whole lot. I used to be an asshole. I had a phone call the other day with somebody that, when I was in the infantry before I went to Special Forces, he was one of my soldiers, and I was an asshole. I was a staff sergeant at the time. That I dealt with him a lot. We went to Afghanistan together, and I was just talking to him, and I was, we're fine now. But I was admitting to him, basically, I was like, man, I know I was an asshole back then. I know I dug in your ass. Some things were just, were ego driven. I was just a straight asshole. I just wanted results. I wanted them right now. And anybody that couldn't produce like I wanted was fucking weak in my mind. They're just like, and I had no compassion, not much at all, really, for anybody that I considered less than or weak by my standards. And I apologize to him, and I have a whole different viewpoint now. And a lot of that came from, like you were mentioning, and us doing a podcast on, is a lot of my failures that I had to face and I had to come to grips with. Hey, you can fucking fail too. You're fucking weak sometimes, and you have to pick yourself up. And if people treated you like you wanted to treat them because of your weakness, then you'd be thrown to the waste.
Yeah.
You wouldn't get second chances. You wouldn't have a fucking opportunity to fix your failures if everything was black and white like you made it out to be when you were such an asshole in charge, And that I had to grow from that. I had to grow, and I made a choice to grow.
we should pick up our next podcast on that thread, what you just said. I think what you just said is people listening to this may say, well, what the fuck? I thought we were going to talk about shooting guns or concealed carry or something like that. And the reason that we're talking about this is twofold, maybe even three. But if you don't understand what life it is you are protecting and how to control yourself, not just self-control, but create the person that you want to be, you can't really ever truly develop anything of any value. Now, there's assholes that become world champions with a pistol. If that's what you want to do, that's okay. But what we're trying to do here is help people in the capacity that we can appreciate their lives so that it's not so egocentric, it's not so one-sided, and they can live in a fulfilled manner. Why not do those things together? Because the same tools that are required to become a good jiu-jitsu practitioner or a good firearms handler are the same tools that are required to become an excellent father or an excellent brother or student or worker or president of a company, whatever it may be. It's the same things. So why not get some added benefit? This has been my thought process in this. This is kind of what the Carry Trainer program's all about. Why make it so one-sided? Let's get a dual or multi-benefit out of it. And not to mention, side note, if you are the kind of person that has to ask your wife permission to go to a shooting school, if she finds out that you're going to come home and not be such a dickhead, maybe she wouldn't be telling you no, or maybe she'd even be giving it to you as a gift. Huh? What do you think about that?
You use this podcast to say, see, we talk about more than just shooting.
I think we should wrap this one up. We're about an hour and 15 minutes in. I don't want to eat up too much of people's time. If you guys are looking for any more information, you can visit us at carrytrainer.com. Z is Instructor Z on Instagram. I am Carry Trainer on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We will have some contact information available for both of us if you guys want to get a hold of us. If you guys have a topic that you'd like to discuss, if it's something that we feel will be of value to share with people, we'll invest the time and do it. If it's something that we can add some info to. Z, you got anything?
No, that's good. Let us know what you want to talk about. There's deeper things, more surface things. We're going to get on some more gun stuff, some more fighting stuff. It'll be out there. But I challenge you out there, get a better, more wider.
Makes sense to me.
Till
next time,
perspective on life.
You guys be well.
What's
we'll catch you on
actually
the
valuable
flip
in your own
side.
value, and see if it improves your shooting and fighting a little bit. So that's all I got, Mick.
Visit our website, carrytrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., Carry Trainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@carrytrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@carrytrainer.com or carrytrainer.com.